Hello, my name is John Reynolds. I'm founder and executive director of Veterans2Work. We were founded in 2008 to help returning veterans launch careers in the growth economy. What I want to talk about today is one of the most common problems that employers face in wanting to hire veterans. I'm assuming that those of you who are employers want to hire veterans, but the big problem that you have, if you're like most employers, is how do you get somebody like that to fit the right job in your company and with a particular culture, right? So big question mark here. I'm going to talk about a methodology and an approach that we use that helps you get past that in ways that traditional methods don't really do. So let's sort of let's remind ourselves what it is that employers really want. They only really want to answer two questions, right? Can this person do the job? They want to know that. And they also want to know, will this person do the job? All right, now, when you're talking about a military type, transition, a veteran who's coming into to the civilian world, that's really tough to do. When you're using standard hiring techniques, that is to say, a resume plus a structured interview, right? The problem is that you've got this person here who's very, very good at his job, but for example, if you're a infantryman like I was, then the sort of suggested next career step is to be a security guard in a mall. Well, that's not exactly that doesn't exactly open up the field in a way that is terribly encouraging. Military resume, same thing. It's okay, you were a good tank driver or you're a good mortarman, but how do I know you might be really good doing something in my company, the job that I'm looking to fill now in my culture? Well, as I said, these traditional techniques are even less effective for younger returning veterans because you don't necessarily, there's really no translatability and it's just really not a highly predictive way of proceeding. So the question is, what if you could go beyond the rear view mirror approach and really go beyond the resumes to look ahead, to have a view into the potential of the veteran and to have some predictability about how that veteran is going to do in that job. How would you do that? Well, how many of you are familiar with predict or aptitude-based hiring? Just, okay, so the employers here, that's understandable. What we're doing here is, so I'm going to show you a slide that you may be familiar with in a different form. Standard interview or standard hiring techniques, resume plus a structured interview, are about 17% predictive of job success. All right, now we're talking about the sort of entry-level, lower-level employees. If you add aptitude-based hiring, you're boosting that by 4 to 5 times. So the question is, how do you use aptitude-based hiring in a way that's broadly applicable and that can become sort of a standard across jobs? Okay, there's job enrichment, which factors in. I'm not going to be talking about that. So the first step, the first thing you want to do is to figure out, to identify your top performers, right? Every organization has top performers. You've got a bunch of average people and some below average performers, but you want to isolate your top performers. And then what you want to do is to essentially capture the qualities, those qualities that are most, that contribute most to their success in that job. And the way we do that is that each of these top performers is given a test. It's an aptitude survey, and the result is something like this. Now you can't read this tiny writing here, but those are qualities that have been identified over thousands of jobs by the Department of Labor as having the most impact on productivity in a typical, across a range of jobs. So I'll read you, here you've got accommodating, you've got problem solving, You've got interest in people, interest in things. And you can see that for this particular ideal candidate profile, which is a composite of the top performers in this particular situation, it produces a particular profile, your ideal candidate profile. All right, so that becomes now your baseline that you want to measure against. Now, so step 2 is you want to find veterans that are going to be a good match for that ideal candidate profile, right? And so we happen to have 8,000 veterans in our program, but we have access to a whole lot more. Thank you, Mark Gergerich. He's finding veterans to create more and more of these profiles. The idea is that we want to find those veterans that are going to be a good match. So let's see what that looks like. So here's an example of a weak fit, right? You start with the ideal candidate profile, right? That's the same one we just created. We take a candidate who is, an applicant who's completed his profile. We match those. And here's what we come up with. And we see a lot of red. And the reason for that is because the red is where the candidate falls short of the ideal. Now, it doesn't matter. Most of these don't really matter. What matters is where these thicker dots are. Those are the factors that most predict success in that job. So it's really matching up against those 5 factors that matters in this case. And because in this case they only match up, really they fall short on 4 of 5, it's a weak fit. You don't really want to consider the candidate. Now here's an example of a strong fit, same ideal candidate profile, different candidate. And this time you've got, we call a strong fit, because they meet or exceed the values in each of the attributes that count. All right, there's a little red one there, but that one doesn't really count. So let's see what they look like side by side. Right, you get the weak fit versus a strong fit. Pretty obvious, right? That what one versus the other. Now, okay, so you've just cloned your best workers, at least as close as we can get with modern technology. Now, so we talked about this last 5 minutes or so has been about, can this person do the job, right? They've obviously got the potential. Now we want to communicate to employers, will this person do the job? Well, at Veterans2Work, and by the way, we have here a great example, Jay Park, who's with us today. He's Army veteran. He's been through our program, and really glad to have him here, but he can attest to some of the things that we've created in order to be able to communicate more information to an employer. So can they do it? Yeah, here's his aptitude success profile. Will they do it? Well, first of all, we put them through a bunch of hoops, and we basically have them fill out a bunch of things, not just the vet match profile, but their ONET. How many people know about ONET? Okay, so ONET is, if this is what you're good at, this is what you're passionate about. You put those 2 things together and find a job that meets those. That's the definition of fulfilling career. So we want to include this as well. This is your full resume, obviously. Jobscience, thank you. We use Jobscience to process all of this. We also ask for a personal statement. And what that does is, first it gives us a writing sample, but it also gives employers a little bit more visibility into who this person is as a human being. And then of course we encourage people to go on LinkedIn as well. So just completing these tells you that this person's motivated to sort of to show up, if you will. The other things, career readiness, career on-ramps, and career launch activities, those are all recorded in the veteran's profile by way of like certificates of completion, certifications. Jay has, how many certifications do you have now? Sales? 3 certifications. And we would track that in here so that an employer can access this and say, hey, wow, this person they've completed basic business training, they've really gone through this whole thing, they really are career ready. And and they're motivated. So that's what that looks like. Let's look at what the composite view, what I call a 360 view, is going to look like to an employer. All right. The first thing is, right, we talked about the sort of the rear view mirror stuff, the resume, the LinkedIn, all of the contact information. Second thing about that, we talked about career summary and the personal statement. Those can be included optionally. But then here's where we get into the front-facing view, right? You've got your career success profile, which is a composite of 3 different measures that an employer can use to hire people into a job strictly based on aptitude and then train for skills. So what it does, it gives employers a high degree of confidence to hire somebody who doesn't otherwise have experience. ASVAB, by the way, that's the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, and it's a pretty comprehensive test that only really is going to be useful if you've taken it within the last couple of years. But we want to add it optionally. And then again, we have a summary of the different courses completed and assignments and certifications right there. And then finally, we also provide the employer with a summary of the tax credits that are available to them for hiring this veteran. Tax credits come in the form, we have our friend Dan Knirk here, who's with he's a vet rep that helps veterans find jobs. He knows very well what I'm talking about, but the U.S. government provides tax credits, and they also provide, and based on how long the veteran's been unemployed and the disability rating. But they can go up to pretty high, $9,600, plus there's other subsidies and things like that. So we want to make sure that the employer has that information as well. We have a partner who will help deliver it. So that's the employer view. So really, this is a conclusion of my formal talks. I wanted to leave enough room for questions, but essentially, this is our approach. We want to get to a database of, our dream is to get to 100,000 veterans who have the vet match, so that an employer can go in and say, find me a veteran in Joliet, Illinois, or find me 10 veterans that match this profile. I want to hire them. So that's where we want to get to. Right now, we're still doing this, employer by employer. So I'll stop right there and see if there's any questions about this and comments.
Do you have a standardized test that you're using in the development of your profiles?
Well, the survey is standardized. It's the same for everybody, and it's been developed by lots of PhDs who kind of figured out the right 75 questions to ask to get the result. And the result, the nice thing about it is it is a pretty much a static result. I mean, it stays with you. It's not really going to change, because it's your temperament, your personality, those kinds of things. But it's the same exact test. So, they're going to be taking the same test in 5 years as they did 5 years ago.
How about the ONET test? Is that a standard assessment that can be integrated in with Jobscience, for example?
It is. It's actually developed by the Department of Labor, and there's a version that's been adapted for veterans called My Next Move or something like that. But ONET can be used against a large database of over 1,000 different job types to say, how do my interests suggest a career path? Right. So interests, as we know, aren't sufficient to predict success. Right. So that's what the vet match, the aptitude is all about, is to say, hey, look, your DNA really looks really similar to that of people who have the practitioners who've been doing this for a long time.
But if they're not interested in doing that work, then it's still not going to be a fit, right?
No, exactly. So you want to, that's exactly why we want to give them, an opportunity to see, oh, okay, where's the overlap between what they're good at and what they're interested in? And if the same career paths come up, then that's a really good sign.
So are are you doing that as part of an application process on Jobscience, or are you doing that as because 75 questions seems like an awful lot to ask somebody to do kind of in one sitting. How is that? How do you generally have them take this battery of tests?
Well, first of all, it's the adoption is surprisingly high, and that's because it takes about 15 minutes. They're essentially, you have 5 different answers. It's none to all, and like that.
Right.
And so you can just go through it in about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, John,
Mark?
we encourage the applicants to go through it quickly because we want the gut level reaction. We don't want them to think about it too much. Because if they think about it, then they're going to start thinking about what do we want to see as opposed to what is the real deal. And we really encourage them to be honest because we want them to be happy in the end.
Yeah, and you get distortions too. You get people who overthink it. And 1 out of 6, 7 times, somebody will fill it out and it's like, okay, there's internal inconsistencies here that just, and usually it's because somebody overthought it. Yeah.
So the product that the vet gets is a really highly portable calling card, essentially like an electronic medical health record.
That's a great way. That's a really good analogy. Don't forget that the veteran gets a lot of value right out of this. I mean, they have a reason to fill these out, regardless if there's not of whether or not there's a job, an open job that's available. They get like this window into how their innate skills and capabilities can be applied in the corporate world. I'm getting a little bit of a high sign here. Maybe it's a lot of high sign, but I think we need to wrap up unless there's burning questions.
One thing on the worker opportunity tax credit, the employer has 15 years in which to redeem that credit.
Oh, wow. Okay, 15 years to redeem the credit. And some of these credits can be, again, 5-figure credits. So, yeah, and we will help you get that. We have a partnership. We'll basically give us limited power of attorney, you get money back. Mark, you had a quick one?
I just was going to say for any employers here, how do we engage us? It's right there. But John at Veterans2Work, and we can work out a plan that works for you as far as how you get candidates, how you communicate jobs. And we have different service levels.
Do you have a website as well?
Oh, yeah, we do. In fact, if the internet's down, or I would show you a live example on our website of, it's veterans2work.org. Veterans2work.org.
The O was the only thing showing there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Veterans2work.org. Thank you, David. Great. Well, thank you very much for the time. Thank you.